Tonight, we're talking about the equality of functions, or, as I like to put it, dealing with two different functions. Our goal is to be able to find a common point or ordered pair that satisfies both functions. Let's start with this function, f of x equals 2x minus 4. It's read f of x equals 2x minus 4. The f of x is just defining the function. The function is f. It is defined as doubling the input, or doubling x, and then subtracting 4. And we'll see that we can make a table quite easily simply by plugging in some values for x, or plugging in some inputs. We notice that when x equals 4, y equals 4. When x equals 5, y equals 6, so on and so forth. And you'll also notice that each input has just one output. That idea guarantees that f of x is a function. When one output to each input occurs, we know we have a function. The next function we're going to look at is g of x. Again, it said g of x, and in this case it's equal to x plus 2. The definition of this function is adding 2 to the input. Whatever I plug in, I'm just going to add 2, and that's going to give me my output. And again, we create a table really easily. G of x equals x plus 2. We plug in 4, we get out 6. We plug in 5, we get out 7. We plug in 6, we get out 8, so on and so forth. And again, each input has just one output, which makes g of x a function. So now let's compare the two tables. We have f of x on the left, we have g of x on the right. And as we look at these tables, we should be asking ourselves, at which input or what value of x do these functions have equal outputs or y values? And we'll notice that that occurs right here. So we could say, quite simply by looking at the table, that these two functions share a point of equality, or an ordered pair, at 6, 8, 6 comma 8, x value is 6, y value is 8, and that makes them equal. So what are some other ways we can compare two functions? What other tools do we have in our box, our brain, that allow us to compare two functions? If the graphs cross, they must be equal. Graphs being graphically comparing two functions. If we can graph them, we can see where their points cross. If the graphs cross, they must be equal. And how do we graph? We simply turn those tables into graphs. And here we go. I've graphed g of x and I've graphed f of x. G of x is in the blue, f of x is in the red, and the quick question is, where do these two lines intersect? So these two equations have an equality at 6 comma 8. Because the two lines cross at 6, 8, they share that ordered pair. That is their point of equality. That is where they are equal to one another. So we've looked at graphically. What else can we do? What else is in our toolbox that allows us to compare two functions? What other skills do we have? Well, we can do it algebraically. Algebraically, just using variables and numbers, writing it out, we can compare these two functions. How? Well, ask yourself, where does f of x equal g of x? Well, let me show you how we can do this. I can take the f of x function here, I can take the g of x function right here. I know that I'm looking for a point where they're equal to one another. Where does f of x equal g of x? By simply plugging in 2x minus 4 for f of x and plugging in x plus 2 for g of x, I can create an equation in one variable, a skill that we all have. We can solve these. Two x minus 4 equals x plus 2. That's our algebraic equation we just set up. How can we solve this? What do we do? Awesome. First thing we do is isolate the variable. That's how we solve equations with one variable. We isolate the variable. So we start with 2x minus 4 equals x plus 2. What's your first step? For me, I added 4 to both sides. This doesn't have to be the first step, but it's my first step. By adding 4 to both sides, I get 2x now equals x plus 6. What would you do now? I would subtract x from both sides. I'm trying to get the variable all by itself, or isolating the variable. In this scenario, 2x minus x gives me x, and I'm left with just 6 on one side. I know that x equals 6. But this is only an input. We need an ordered pair. What's missing? You're absolutely right. We're missing a y value or an output. So let's plug that 6 in for f of x. We plug 6 into either of the functions to get the output. I chose the f function. Plug in 6 into f of x equals 2x minus 4. I get 12 minus 4. And simple subtraction tells me that f of 6 is equal to 8. Meaning, when I plug in 6, it's my input, my output is 8. My ordered pair would read 6 comma 8, or 6, 8. So the functions are equal at 6, 8. We have an input, we have an output, and they're both shared. How do we check? Well, we know that f of x, when x equals 6, or f of 6 is equal to 8. Now we need to check the other function, the g of x function. We know that g of x is equal to x plus 2. We know the input, where they're supposed to be equal. What's that input? Right, it's 6. We plug in 6 for x. We very simply get 6 plus 2. We know that that's equal to 8. And this tells me that when I plug in 6 to the g function, I get out 8. So let's review. How can I find equality in functions? What are the skills that I use? Think of the tools you have in your mind. One, we can create tables. Tables are great. Tables clearly lay out the points on each line in each function. The only problem I foresee is that sometimes you have to create really large tables. If you don't have an idea where they cross or an idea where they're equal, you could be searching for a while. We could do it graphically. Graphically is really nice. It puts out 2 lines. However, sometimes that point isn't so clear. If we're dealing with fractions, our point will not be clear. For me, algebraically works. Will always work. However, some of the silly mistakes we all make, forgetting a negative, not multiplying correctly, will really create problems with trying to solve these equations, or these functions, for the equality algebraically. However, we can always check. Algebraically, we can always check our work by plugging in our input into another function and making sure that they have the same output. So, here is your work. H of x equals 3x minus 4. K of x equals 2x plus 2. I want you to find the ordered pair where h of x equals k of x. Bring your work to class tomorrow. Have a great night.